who I am. Well, if somebody would...
It was, again, it was more like, what am I going to take? Not, do I want to go or not? And again, when it comes to this whole conversation about conditioning and deconstruction, if we want to get into the education thing, that's a whole other side. Because again, we work in trades.
Yeah.
We were in transportation, and as we know, I think there's a bit of a shift now because there's a severe labor shortage, and they're having no choice but to acknowledge it. But in my day in high school, it was like if you had certain marks, automatically you were going to university.
White collar, blue
collar, that's it.
From the get-go.
There was never a conversation about it. It was never, and it was always presented in a way of one is better than the other, one's lesser than the other, which is crazy pants.
It's crazy because the entire structure of our society relies on the trades. Mm-hmm. Nothing gets to the fancy office with the white collar workers without a truck.
Yeah.
So it's the underpinning of, oh, don't even get me going on this rant.
Well, I knew that's why I was like, do we want to go there? but it's, you know, and that's
so it was
just
expected
the way
of
it's
you.
built. So it was just
Again.
expected. It was just, that's what's happening.
Yeah.
So it was a matter of what I was going to take. And so then I started narrowing on that. And for me at the time, so music in my mind was not an option.
Yeah.
I was going to go to post-secondary, so it was, what am I going to do with that? And at the time, I ended up choosing to do a Bachelor of Science with specialization in human kinetics. I loved sciences, I loved sports and athletics, and so I thought this would be a good balance of my science brain, my science and like math, rational brain, and like my sports brain, which would hopefully balance it out and be like a fun aspect of it. And I didn't know if I wanted to do physio or occupational therapy, potentially something in the medical field. That would be an okay launch
a good
launch
stepping
point
stone
for that, a stepping stone. And then I was thinking a lot about teaching, which would give me like a science and phys ed teachable. So I ended up going to post-secondary. I finished my 4-year bachelor's degree. Then I did a bachelor in education. I became, on paper, a high school teacher. I taught for a very short period of time. And then I ended up basically deciding to continue to work in private industry where I was with you guys and not pursue my teaching career, which was another tough conversation with my parents.
Right.
Because that's when I think for the first time I really started to question what I was doing, where I was going, what I wanted to do. So at that time, I was finishing school, working pretty much full-time hours in private industry, more in business, finance, accounting, that side of things. And I was still doing music on the side this whole time. I've been singing professionally as a hobby or like a side hustle for all of these years through doing all this traditional education, working towards a traditional career. But then when I finished teachers college, I went to my parents and said, I'm not going to take a contract in teaching for a year. Thank you for everything you've done for me and what you've instilled, and I'm really happy. I completed these 2 degrees. I came out of university with no debt, but I've been grinding this whole time, and I need just a year to just take a beat and figure out and focus on music. I had some touring opportunities in Europe, and I didn't want to miss out on that. I knew if I started a contract or got started in the teaching game, it was at the time, it's shifted a bit after COVID, but at the time it was very difficult to get contracts or teach. Yeah. So I knew once I went in, I'd have a very hard time walking away from something and risk like losing or ruining my reputation.
You're in.
So I was like, I'm going to take a break. And that was a hard conversation because I think that's when my parents started to get the sense of, oh, maybe she's going to do this whole music thing and never get back to this 9-to-5 pension, secure benefit job. So that was the first time it was tough, but I guaranteed them it was just a year and I was going to keep working for you guys in between tours. And so I'd still have money, and this touring, the shows, like the music aspect was going to pay for my travel. So why wouldn't I want to see the world for free, basically? And they were excited for me, but you could tell they were starting to get a little nervous. And my dad worked for the city from the time he was 18 till 55, retired, full pension benefits. And he worked really hard for that.
Yeah.
And I think he feels as though like it afforded him a life, and for my mom and us, better than what the environment they grew up in. So he just wanted me to have that and not have to stress about money the way that they had in their life. So again, it came down to the money thing. It was like, what about finances? What about your financial security and your future? And it was never about what are you feeling called to do? What are you passionate about? What makes you happy? And not because they don't want me to be happy. Of course they want me to be happy.
But they had concluded there was stress with no money. Therefore, that equals, if you go down this path, you will be happier because you won't be stressed about money. I think a lot of what you just touched on is so important, because I think so many people make decisions about their life, driven by fears and also appeasing or managing whoever is in their world that has an opinion or weight in on the choices that we make, or that we give that to people, whether it's parents who are a huge, powerful force, and your parents are wonderful and loving, and it's not about them or anything. It's just about us being able to tell our story and what we went through without any kind of, blame or letdown, or because I remember when I was starting to talk about my story and what I was going through, feeling like, oh, I'm going to hurt my parents' feelings by talking about this, but luckily that's not the case. And if you're just telling your story authentically and from where you are, how could people who love you, not want to support that. So I think a lot of people, I think that's why this conversation is so important, because a lot of people make decisions in their lives and they have this whole path, and it's just like, they don't wake up and say, I'm going to live my whole life based on everybody else's ideals or things, but it's one step at a time. And before you know it, you're in a life that is draining you emotionally and mentally and physically. And for me, it caused a complete physical, mental, emotional breakdown. And so what was it like for you when you went down that road and kind of started looking up going, I'm not sure about this?
Yeah. So I think then again, I was starting to open my mind up to it, because now I was diving into music at another level. Yeah. I was on the road, I was touring, and I mean, I would have been 22 at the time, probably. You're living your best life. Yeah. You're traveling, you don't have a lot of stress at the time. Like, I was single. There was nothing holding me back anywhere. So but again, I still wouldn't let myself go there. I wasn't like, oh, this is sweet, like 100%, I'm doing this, it's done. It was, I'm going to enjoy this while it lasts, because I got to get back home soon and buckle down and do what I'm supposed to do.
Isn't that so interesting? Like, the minute you let yourself feel free and happy and in the moment and just loving everything around, it's like, it's temporary. It's going to go away.
Exactly.
Or this isn't real life. This isn't real.
Yeah.
Your
this
real
is just
life
for
is
fun.
this. Yeah, this is just for fun. It's so bad. How we live is so backwards.
Exactly.
It's so backwards,
It is.
Yeah. Sorry, Carrie.
So,
I was just like,
absolutely.
It's like, and I did it, I did the same thing, but because we're taught that our education system, everything sends all that messaging, and it's so backwards. We're supposed to be happy. You're supposed to follow your joy and the things that may bring you life. Yeah. Just a side note.
Exactly. I saw a TikTok, actually, I'm sure you've seen, and it's this person talking about how, like, they say when somebody asks you, like, what do you want to do with your life? Yeah. And they assume you're going to answer with some, like, very specific career goal or whatever. And the person's just like, to be happy. Yeah, but, like, what do you really want to do with your life? To be happy. What are you going to do with your day today? Find a way to be happy. You know, and it's so crazy that that's not an acceptable response.
Right. Guys, people can't handle it.
No,
like, that's
people are like, ooh, that's like really hippy dippy. Like, you know?
Hippy dippy. And there's a John Lennon quote, I think, for that, or a story he shared was, he was in school. Have you seen this?
No, I don't.
Where he was like, there was an assignment, the teacher said, okay, so something like draw a picture of, you know, your life or what you want to be when you grow up. And so he said happy on his thing. And the teacher said, no, you didn't understand the assignment. And then he said, I think he responded, no, I think you're not understanding the assignment.
You're not understanding the whole point of life.
You don't understand the assignment of life.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was, it just still wasn't an option for me. I never really thought that way. It was like, that was like the fun corner of my life. Yeah. But then it's like, I needed to get back and get down to business. And I remember again, having a conversation with my dad at some point, about careers and stable careers and finances and whatever we were chatting about. And my parents had just started kind of traveling at that point, because I was traveling long before they ever did, because again, they saw it as something they didn't need to spend money on. But then as I started traveling, I think they had a moment where they were like,
wait a minute.
We've been working our butt off this whole time, and she's just jet setting and checking out the world and having a great time. Like, maybe we should consider doing something like this. And of course, I was super encouraging of that. And I started being like, hey, I'll be wherever on this trip. Why don't you come and meet me for a bit? And they started doing that. And I was so happy that they started doing that. But it took like that moment for them as like a little kick in the butt to be like, it's okay. Like, she's doing this and we're happy for her, but also like, why aren't we doing this for ourselves? Exactly. So they were starting to open themselves up more to enjoying their life. And I like to hope that I played a little part in helping them see that. But I remember in some of those tough conversations where they wouldn't necessarily fully understand why I was making the decisions I was. I remember telling my dad, like, we'd be sitting at the dinner table. Another thing that I realized as a kid that I didn't think about till later. We'd be sitting at the table at dinner. My parents were always good about making sure like we had a few dinners a week together as a family. And how often I'd hear him come in from work, sit down at the table, be eating, and him be like upset and explain that Jimmy, who he's worked with for 30 years, just retired a year ago. He's worked his whole life, worked very hard, picks up overtime, never, spent money on trips and stuff. They had all these retirement plans, and a year into retirement, just like dropped dead of a heart attack. And how often I heard that, and my dad would be like, it's so sad, you see a guy who's like worked so hard his whole life for like, when we retire, we'll do this. When we retire, we'll do that. And I remember like saying to my parents specifically, like, I never want to live my life for Freedom 55. No. I don't want to live my life for when I have time. Yes, I think it's very important to be like financially responsible, have a plan, think of your future. I'm not saying throw all caution to the wind and
live on the streets,
run around and just like spend money.
Make it rain.
But I'm like, I don't want to live my life for that because tomorrow is not guaranteed.
It is not.
And why wait all these years to be happy? Maybe there's certain things like bucket list things that maybe it's like your retirement dream trip, but you have to make room for yourself to do the things you want to do, whatever that is, big or small.
It can't be like there's just this corner cupboard. You kind of describe this corner thing where my happiness and my fun happens over here with my hobby or whatever it is that I do, and the rest of my days is just slugging it out. You can't live like that. It's not sustainable long term. No. And so So when for you was it when for you did you have that moment where you were like, I cannot do this anymore? I have to make changes in my life. Was there a specific moment? Was it just slow little pieces?
So I think for me, like a lot of people, it takes something terrible happening for you to stop and really look inward and reflect. So for me, it wasn't necessarily one moment. I did have some like traumatic experiences happen in my life. And again, I was like, gotta keep going. I never wanted to be the victim. I never wanted to burden anybody with my problems. I just would kind of like shove it under the rug and keep working, you know, because I never wanted to miss a day of work. I never wanted to really take time for myself or sit with myself because I think I was afraid. I knew that if I did, I'd realize I needed to get out. And I wasn't ready for that. So for me, it was like a lot of things compounding over about a 10-year period between 22 and 32 of some trauma happening in my life that I never really dealt with for me, my work situation did become toxic for me. And I really do put on myself, like I always had the choice to leave, whatever it was, and I wasn't choosing to do that. But for me, it just eventually compounded up to when the pandemic happened, and it was the first time in about 10 years that I took a breath, I felt like. Between the hours I was working, the situations I was in, all the sports I was still playing, all the music I was still doing, it was the first time, the pandemic, when I sat at home for even one day looking at the wall and I started spinning because it became a very uncomfortable place for me. So in that moment, that's when it started. And I think you and I had a chat. We did a soul tuning session. And for me, that was like the day that I then officially decided I needed to make some major changes. And then from there, it started the unraveling in a good way. You know, I started to really look in. I did some therapy. We started having a lot of conversations because I knew you had just been through this all in a way. And I also saw you coming into your own again and me meeting a new version of you that I think you were burying for so long. And I was envious. I was like, man, this girl, and let's also set the record straight. Like, you've been through a lot, a lot. And so I was like, if she can do that with 7 children involved, and because for me, again, I really, the decisions I make pretty much affect me, myself, and I don't have a family or a partner. So I was like, if she can be brave enough to do this, not only for herself, but have it, like, there's more people involved. Too. If she can do it, like, what's my excuse?
But I think you brought up a really good point, because we have our conditioning and the things we learn, and then the things that we sort of deconstruct and reconstruct. But trauma, when trauma is part of our childhood and part of our makeup, and we haven't dealt with that trauma yet, we fill our lives with busy.
For sure.
Constantly distracting. Because the concept of sitting with yourself and just being okay with yourself, it's like, no, because there's so much pain waiting for you there that just hasn't been processed yet.
Absolutely.
And that's such an important piece of this whole idea of when we come into knowing who we are, it's also knowing what has made us who we are. And that includes, sadly, trauma for most people, I think. And what I'm learning about trauma is that, like, trauma for you and trauma for me could look wildly different. And there's no, like, competition on suffering and trauma.
No.
It's that, and it's not a specific set of events that it's, check mark, that qualifies for trauma. It's anything your body and brain cannot process, whatever happens to you, no matter what age it is, something so big happens to you and it's too much for you to process. And so that is a traumatizing incident, and that stays in you. It stays in your system, it stays in your body.
And it affects you not just mentally. So trauma, as you were saying, is not, like, you don't just have, like, mental and emotional responses. I think you have physical responses too. And so that was another big indicator for me that obviously I recognized, but I didn't at the same time. I think I just had in my mind, it's because I work so much and I'm so exhausted in my life. I don't spend enough time working out or this or
Right.
or I'm stress eating or whatever it is. But again, part of my therapy when I started diving into it, and I started working with a dietitian as well, who had a psychology background. So it was a really great approach for me, and it helped me mentally, emotionally, and physically. It's like I had convinced myself that these were all the reasons why like my body was changing or different than it used to be. But I really came to learn and know that for me, like it mostly was just stress. Like if anything, I have been under eating for 10 years.
Yep.
It's just every day, every session with my dietitian, we'd go through like food and stuff after doing and it was very holistic and amazing experience. But it was always like, you're actually not eating enough. You need to eat more, and like you're eating the right things.
Your body was in fight or flight.
I was
constantly.
just in survival.
Yeah.
And I'd have days I didn't eat at all because I was so stressed or busy. And then your body hangs on to things, not only from like the emotional energy, mental side of things, but also from a standpoint of like, this girl is so busy in her life and doesn't take any time for herself. Like Lord knows when she's going to give us anything to go. Food. And whether that's actual like food nourishment, whether that's other types of nourishment in terms of self-care.
Yeah.
Like who knows when she's going to give that to us again. So we got to hang on to it for dear life.
It's true. That's how the body works as far as carrying, that's what I learned about me too, and the cortisol levels and all that stuff being off the charts. So you came into this place, you were just in a dark place in the sense that there was no fulfillment, you really weren't taking any time, and the pandemic hit and you finally had to stop.
Yeah.
And it forced you to sit with yourself and start seeing things and looking at things. So what are some of the things you're really proud about that you've brought into your life, and choices that you've made in this sort of reconstruction part as you sort of rebuild or decide who you are and what you're about? What are some of the things that really helped you heal or are helping you?
So I feel like I'm like still like a little baby bird in this journey. I have a lot to learn still, and there's a lot of days I still wake up and I'm like, oh Lord, what did I do? When the old, ways for me, that my old way of thinking like creeps in and tries to take back over. But for me, it like changing my like environment was really important, and I had to get out of the work situation that I was in. It took me a year from the time I decided I needed a change to actually leaving. It took me a year to do that, because it was really scary. It's hard to walk away from, again, no matter what your experience is, it's hard to walk away from a certain level of, again, what you've been conditioned to believe is like this stable, safe environment. When like for me personally, it was not stable or safe. But to the outside world and everyone in my life, it was stable and safe.
Yeah.
And then it's hard to challenge that with people and be like, I know you think this is like, I have this great situation here, and on the outside, I'm sure it does look great. And I was happy to I bought a home and I own my own home, and I'm grateful for all of that. But then when you really start to say like, oh, I'm gonna walk away from this, and how am I gonna make this work? It can be tough. So I'm really proud that I made the decision. I followed through on it. It came with a lot of difficult conversations with people in my life that I love, and I didn't owe anyone an explanation, and I didn't need everyone in my life to be on board. But it's really nice when you do have support and people are on board. And I was really lucky in that way. Most people responded really positively, and that makes it a bit easier. But I'm really still proud of myself that I did that. And I'm surprised in people I run into, even ex-coworkers or, again, people in my life I haven't seen in a long time. I'm shocked by how many people I run into, and you're chit-chatting and, oh, what's new? And And when I say what I'm doing now and that I'm self-employed and working in music full-time on my own music and with other artists, and I quit my 9 to 5 after 15 years, I know that it's a good thing and I'm proud of it, but it still surprises me how many people's initial reaction is like, wow, like you're really brave, because most people would just continue to be unhappy in that for the next 15, 20 years and just do their thing.
You're proud about the fact that you made a decision, and you were just talking about how shocked you were. You expected people to respond to you and be like, oh my God, you left your 9 to 5. But they're like, wow, that took a lot of courage to do that.
Yeah, and I find there's surprisingly, for me, more people than I thought who seem like they're envious of that situation. Like, I wish I had the guts to totally do a 180 on my career, or change my career or my job, or do this thing I always wanted to do.
And that's why it's so important that we do. It is, I had the same experience. It is the single reason to do it, because it gives everyone permission to do the same and to live your life authentically and follow what brings you joy. And so I'm not surprised that they reacted that way, because it was very similar in my experience. Because you instantly you're happier, so you emanate joy and happiness, and it's infectious. People feel that from you, and they want to feel that way.
And I think you can probably relate to this more than me, but I don't have children. But if I do someday, I think about that, like, will I be proud of, like, would I want my child to make choices in this way, or with these conditions looming over their head, or these expectations? Like, what example am I setting for the other people in my life, whether it's children, friends, other family? And am I proud of that? And can I really stand behind my decisions? And I could for a long time. And I got to the point for me where I was like, if I can't, I love to have a good debate and conversation. If I can't debate this and stand behind my position and point in life, whatever it is that I'm doing, then like, why am I doing it? Exactly. And I need to trust that more. So I don't have it all figured out by any means. And there's lots of days where I'm like, ooh, you know.
So what am I
doing?
Yeah, exactly. What is one piece of advice or something that helped you maybe, or something for anybody watching who's kind of teetering on the edge? They've been toying with, they've got that thing that they've always wanted to do, but for all of the reasons that you described, maybe it's the same for them, where they feel held back because of security or money, or feeling responsible, or what people are going to think about them. What would be a piece of advice or encouragement that you would give somebody who's right on the edge?
I think you just have to give yourself permission. And we often look to other people, defer to other people in our lives for a lot of things. And it's great to have a team around you. And even if the person around you that you go to talk about all your stuff with, and they give great advice and they're supportive and they're like, do whatever you want to do, there still comes a point when you just really have to take the time to sit with yourself and just trust your gut and do what needs to be done, even if it's terrifying. You know, because you don't want to have any regrets. I don't want to have any regrets. You only have this one life to live in this moment, and hopefully it's a long life, and you don't want to be miserable for it all. You know, I don't like to live with regrets or say I have regrets, because I'm really thankful for a lot of the dark and not good times, because I don't think I would be here and in the position I am now if that didn't happen. I needed those lows to create the highs.
Agreed.
So it's just, you have to do it and try it. And even if you make a decision to do X and you fall flat on your face and it doesn't work out the way you thought, then just adjust and try something else. And I'm really trying to give myself permission to just try and fail. I've never been a good failure.
I've never been good at failing.
Never been good
Doesn't
at
feel very
failing.
good.
You know, it doesn't. I mean, and who is? You know,
But
it's
you are
not a comfortable place
far
to be.
from failing right now.
Well,
in your,
I
in your
hope
life,
so.
you're killing it out there. It's awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here and for
thank
sitting
you
with
for
me and
having
chatting, even though we see each other, I don't know, every day.
I know, but it's not often we sit like this
We
with no
don't.
cell phones or computers or
Yes,
distractions and just chat.
Exactly.
It's nice.
Thank you very much. So thanks for watching, everybody. This has been a T.A.R.A. session.
I know who I